The article I chose for this assignment was grades. When, why, what impact, and how. This article was written by Ken O'Connor. Ken O'Connor started out as a teacher and curriculum coordinator in the Toronto and Scarborough school boards. He then became an independent consultant on assessment, grading, and reporting, and is the author of many articles and books pertaining to the subject of assessment. We'll start with a summary of this article. Before we can talk about this article, we need to distinguish between a couple terms. This article distinguishes between the terms grade versus the term mark and score as two different but similar things. Grade is defined as a symbol, whether a letter or number, on a report card that summarizes student achievement, so it's more of an overall score. A marker score is a letter or number symbol given to any student test performance that provides evidence of student achievement. Then we move on to the history of the grading system. A lot of this article is about this because it starts in about 1880, spanning to about 1990 present day. Prior to 1880, grades were given more in a narrative form where you were listed the competencies that you had mastered. The late 1800s and 1900s, where you see the introduction of the letter and number symbols. This began at the university level, then trickled down to the K-12 schooling system. By 1910, the use of the percentage grades was widely accepted, but by 1912 to 1913, the percentage method was questioned due to its unreliability. 1920, we see a shift from the 5-level A to F scale, and by 1930s, grading on the curve becomes increasingly popular. By the 1950s, there's much dispute, so there's a wide variety of grading and reporting practices used. From 1950 to about 1999, ministries of education tried to develop some direction for grading systems, but it wasn't until 1999 that the Ministry of Education in Ontario developed provincial report cards that were based on using letter grades from 1 to 6 and percentages from 7 to 12. So we know where the grade came from, so what is the purpose of grading? There's three main purposes identified, which is giving feedback, motivating, and sorting. But most ministries do not state an exact purpose of grades, but according to this article, it is identified as gathering information that informs teachers and learning. If this is the purpose, then what impact do grades have on students? For those students who are motivated, who work hard, and behave well, and receive grades that they expect or deserve, it is a motivating thing, but for those who don't, it can be seen as a demotivator. When importance of grades are emphasized, there's three areas that are reduced. There's reduction in students' interest in learning, in students' choice for challenging tasks, and in the quality of students' thinking. The emphasis on grades contributes to an environment that maximizes extrinsic motivation. It not only demotivates those who receive poor grades, but it has an effect on the people or the students who do well. This quote shows this by, for students motivated by grades, the main impact has been to turn school into a grading game, not a learning game. This meaning that students focused on the accumulation of points or grades and not learning. In some cases, students calculate far in advance the exact number of points they need to obtain a certain grade, and then they adjust their efforts accordingly. So this shows this difference in that they're not focusing on the actual learning occurring, but they're focusing on how many points they can actually accumulate and what it takes to get there. The shift in assessment in this area is that it has occurred from comparing students with others to comparing students to preset standards, what happens in present days. But by looking overall at this article at the when, the why, the what impact, and the how of grades and assessment, it is becoming more apparent that the process needs to become more from a shared practice, not from individual, that it needs to be based on an agreed and consistent guidelines and principles that a group or all teachers are using rather than just one individual. The author goes to finish with this quote, "In a perfect world, there would be no grades, at least not as we know them now." The author identifies that this is a reasonable statement, but most likely with the Ministry of Education right now, that there will still be grades in Canadian schools. So in order to make this system more educative, the Ministries of Education must state a clear purpose of these grades and align the policies and expectations with this purpose. So then we have consistency among all educators and there are no surprises. This will show consistency and that we have learned from this history of grading and that the focus is on learning and it is not on the grades. There's a connection between the ministry documents, Growing Success, and this article. Of the 7 principles, I've located 2 that really are shown in this article. The first is are communicated clearly to students and parents at the beginning of the school year or course and at other appropriate points throughout the school year or course. This article identifies that the evaluative process needs to be shifted more to an assessment process, and it talks about formative and summative assessment, so assessment as learning, assessment of learning. So it talks about how that needs to be used and not just evaluating and giving that grade, but giving more of an assessment. Another one was developing student self-assessment skills to enable them to assess their own learning and set specific goals and plan next steps for their learning. This is shown when they show the purpose of grading, when it says one of them is motivating, and within that entails student learning and student motivating, that they see where they're at, and then with the teacher they work together to make goals, and that they are learning on their own, and we're enabling students to do this. Reflecting upon this, from being a student myself when I was in high school, I remember being very grade-driven, grade-motivated, and I knew what it did take to get a 90, and it kind of throughout the years, it took less effort because I knew what was needed, and I kind of, thinking about it now, I wish that someone would have challenged me more, or I could have challenged myself more, but I wasn't self-reflecting enough about that then, so it never happened. As a teacher candidate, one of my associate teachers would post the marks up on the wall, and it was kind of like these kids walked into this class and they weren't just so-and-so, but they were so-and-so with this mark. So if they had a bad mark, that's really demotivating because they're reminded of it every day because it's on the wall and it might not be helping them to work better. And if you had that good mark, it's kind of, oh, you're happy with yourself and you didn't have to work any harder. So I don't think grades always are a good interpretation of a student's learning. How I can apply this to my own teaching from this article? Well, this article is a lot about trial and error because it shows the history of grading and what's worked and what hasn't worked. So it's kind of can be applied to my own practice because I need to try and I need to make mistakes, and I will make mistakes, and then kind of see what works the best and what kind of assessment works the best and evaluation to enable my students to learn in my environment. It also helped me further understand assessment for learning as being diagnostic, assessment as learning as my formative assessment, and assessment of learning as my summative assessment. Thank you.